Welcome to Everything Life and Real Estate. Let's get started with our hosts, Linda McKissick and Dana Gentry.
Welcome to Everything Life and Real Estate. I'm Linda McKissick.
And I'm Dana Gentry.
Dana, before we get started, what's new with you?
Hey there. Man, it's been a busy, what is today? Tuesday. Busy Tuesday today. I've been on Zooms and did a Connect Live earlier today, and lots of stuff going on today. What about you?
Same, just zoomed out. You know, now that with COVID, we're all Zooming everything, right? Every day, Zoom. I got 4 or 5 lined up tomorrow also, so it'll be more of the same. But I'm super excited about today because today, Dana and I have an amazing guest that I have been raving about. So Dana and I decided let's just put him on the podcast because we think you guys are going to love him also. Yep. And today we have with us Sid Walker. And I stumbled across Sid's books. I can't remember how. I told him I think I'd heard about it on a podcast or something. And I grabbed one of his books, and then I've just dove into the second book that he had. So welcome, Sid. We're happy to have you.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
So tell us a little bit about you and your journey, kind of bring us up to where we are today. And then I'd love to dig into a little bit about some of your philosophies about call reluctance, and from all your many years of experience and thousands of clients, you know, help our audience, because we have an audience of mostly realtors, some other business people, but okay. Everybody I think struggles with call reluctance and self-promotion. And so I loved your first book called that. And so tell us a little bit, bring us up to today about you, and then let's dive into that. Sure.
Well, I've been a coach my whole career. I was probably 15 or so years ahead of the coaching thing. And I started with Cherie Carter Scott. Actually, I got certified as a coach in like 1980. She's kind of considered the mother of coaching, but last time I talked to her, she'd sold 42 million books. That's pretty good.
And who was that again?
I'm sorry?
What was her name again?
Oh, Cherie Carter Scott.
Cherie Carter.
Yeah. She's actually, they were in Santa Barbara for a long time. She's actually in Thailand now, but
wow.
but her best book, her most popular book is if Life is a Game, These Are the Rules.
Oh, I think I
But anyway, she's neat, really neat person. Been on Oprah and done a lot of speaking kind of thing. And I ran into her earlier in my career, and very intuitive in their approach. So that was kind of the thing that appealed to me. I guess I'm very much an intuitive coach. And also I've had a lot of call reluctance, or kind of always had some challenges in promoting myself, and became a speaker, and, wasn't a natural speaker, but I figured that out with a bunch of coaches over the years. And that's how I got clients for a long time. Mostly done intangible sales, financial advisors primarily, but plenty of real estate people in there, especially today with my call reluctance book. But I would say, because a lot of my research and development has been out of necessity, because I had a lot of call reluctance myself, and I've always been kind of a artist. I probably should have been a musician, but I just never wanted to leave the lifestyle. So I got into the coaching thing. So people are more, my coaching clients are my art. I'm just, everybody's different. And I love the challenge of that. I have clients all over the world. And I never gave up on the call reluctance thing. Somehow it never felt right to get out of sales and promoting myself. And I'm glad I didn't, because I kept having more and more breakthroughs and helped a lot of people along the way. I mean, I've coached thousands of people, but the thing in recent years that's really been kind of fascinating to me is the level of breakthrough that I've had with a lot of people. I mean, just being able to really help them go from being to fearless on the phone. I mean, there's a definite technique to it. Anybody can do it. And we'll talk about that more as we're going here. But, I started out doing things very intellectually. I've been to the leadership level, a lot of programs over the years, including 10 years as a lay monk in a monastery run by women in Long Beach, California. And that was kind of the final piece for me. I did a lot of other programs you would recognize, but that really gave me it was a very advanced program on intuition, really. So the combination of really learning how to ignore the negative kind of self-talk and self-sabotage that we've all got, and then to trust your intuition more has really been a powerful combination. So those are usually the two things I'm teaching people.
I love that. And in your book, you talked about ego, I guess, being kind of the mastermind behind the negativity and things like that. Talk a little bit about that. That was very, very fascinating.
Yeah, I've done a lot of research there. The part that's probably the most amazing about the research on the ego is most everything that I've come to really support and it's really helped me is thousands of years old. There's nothing new.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I'm talking more from a spiritual perspective, meaning rather than the psychological perspective. But on the spiritual side, the ego has kind of always been in conflict with our spiritual higher self, because
Mm-hmm.
the ego is the psychologists call it the separated self. It's an illusion that gets created when we're born, that we think we're separate and helpless and we're in a dangerous world and somehow we need to survive. There's some truth to that, but there's a lot of it that's not true. And so that's really the way the ego gets created is it's obsessed with its own survival.
Ego's job is to feel like it's protecting you, and yet it doesn't really know, it doesn't decipher what it needs to protect you from. So I love that part, because really it makes us say, okay, I can now put this in a box and understand that this negativity or these thoughts or this fear I have around making my calls or talking to people, even though I have tons of changed lives in my background to remind me why I need to make the call, we still all sometimes don't want to make the call because that ego comes up and creates negativity and fear. And to know that that's the ego's role, and to put that in a box, that actually helped me a lot.
Yeah, it's really quite amazing. And that is huge. I would say that's probably one of my biggest breakthroughs in over 35 years of coaching. I'd say there are two parts to it. One is to learn to ignore the negativity coming from your ego. That's not you. That's all an illusion. And the second thing is to trust your intuition as if your life depended on it. That's 35 plus years of work to get that down into a sentence.
And I can imagine it. Yeah, I can imagine. It sounds so simple, but aren't the greatest ideas that they sound so simple when they finally come out and you're like, wait, it took me years to get this.
I say that all the time. I say, what I teach is amazingly simple, but it does take guts, because you have to let go of that security blanket of the ego and all the information it's collected about how it thinks life works. But the biggest problem with the ego is it's like if you ask 5 people to describe a car accident, you get 5 different answers. Some of it's similar, but a lot of it's pretty weird and strange and totally different sometimes. And so that's the ego's got that kind of information. It's all very subjective. And so it's not the same.
The same thing as somebody's perspective. I know in a class I teach called Fierce, we talk about, we see things through a certain filter. Yep. And so not that we necessarily can do so much to change it, but we can say, how's that perspective working for me? And maybe how could I see it differently?
Well, and another way to say it is, if you were to look at what's the personality of the ego, it basically wants to be rich with no effort and constantly entertained.
Rich with no effort and constantly entertained.
I've never heard that before, but that's good.
Yeah, so we can all relate to that pretty quickly, because when you realize that's probably the dominant part of most people's brain, that's why, if you want to make a fortune, get in entertainment.
Yeah.
Because the ego's kind of taken over the world, and it's just because the ego doesn't want to do anything challenging. It wants to keep everything just the way it is. Because to the ego, if you've survived with it, whatever you've done, even if what you're doing is somewhat negative or you have bad habits you don't even want to do, your ego wants to keep everything the same.
Mm-hmm.
The other way to say it, which is a little more profound, is your ego doesn't mind if you change jobs and change spouses and change cities, as long as you end up doing the same thing with new people.
Some things just have to say the same for the ego.
Yeah.
So I'm a little bit confused on, if the ego wants to be rich, and without doing much. How does that pertain to if I'm trying to make a call and I know what I have as a value and I know I can change lives of people on the other side? How does that relate to me not wanting to make those calls? Is the fear that I keep thinking and like they're too busy or they don't need anything I have? Is that ego?
So that part of the brain, we're calling it the ego, has collected massive amounts of information about anything that's a risk.
Okay.
So the ego also hates rejection.
Yeah, you called it your protector. It's a brilliant protector is what it thinks it is.
Yeah. And so if you're picking up the phone, I mean, the ego doesn't want you to do anything that's potentially dangerous. And I guess the other part that most people don't realize, it's brilliant. It's been around for 10,000 years. It knows every trick in the book. It never sleeps. I tell people, don't even try to negotiate with your ego. It's too smart.
And I loved what you said is if you want to organize your whole life and your whole house and your whole everything, just decide to do something that
sign up for a creative course, sign up for a dance course, or learn a language. Your life will become instantly, amazingly organized.
I actually love this because I, for a long time, kind of heard the word ego and thought super negative and just thought, I don't know. I think just because I had read different books and just thought, well, I don't have an ego, but I did a study last year on of some books from Byron Katie. And
I love Byron Katie.
Yeah, and Byron Katie talks a lot about that, how everybody has ego, and even if you wouldn't think that you are an ego type person, because you can always like think of somebody in your head who you're like, man, they have a big ego, but it's not even really that. It's exactly, you're breaking it down perfectly.
Yeah, well, it's actually a functional part of who we are most of the time, because it's like built into us by the time we're 4 or 5 years old. But the part to me that really becomes powerful is let me back up and say part of the ego, the 1% that's okay, is that it's kind of a combination of it's a sense of self-esteem or self-worth.
Mm-hmm.
So that's okay. That's a good part. But most of the ego is negative. Because it's by its function, it's trying to help us survive in a dangerous world. So it's constantly making movies of everything that could be dangerous. Mm-hmm. So including making calls on the telephone. If anybody's ever yelled at you or for calling them during dinner time or for making any kind of call, that's the first thing your ego is going to play a movie of when you get ready to dial the phone.
So true. Not the change lives and the people that say, thank you for making that call to me. You changed my life. I don't know why those don't outweigh the other.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you have to, if you catch yourself, and that's really a good description. What you have to learn to do is realize you're not your ego. You can ignore it, mm-hmm. and everything will be fine. Actually, your life will be way better if you learn to ignore it. Because from one spiritual perspective, which to me is fascinating, the original reality we were given had no negativity.
Mm.
It was peace, love, joy, and abundance with no opposite. Negativity, by some people, as estimation, happened later. And the problem is we've never been able to get rid of it.
Yeah, so true.
And so that's the challenge is, let me give you the formula in the book. I call it the PIN formula. P stands for stay in the present moment, because the ego really doesn't exist in the present moment. It needs to be in the past or in the future in order to judge.
That's
and
good.
So if you're, because that to me, that's where I'm describing the formula for being in the zone. So if you're in the present moment, that's a key. And everybody knows that. I mean, if you're doing any kind of sports or performing, or if you're, really, being good at anything, you're more focused on what you're doing and you're not judging and evaluating and thinking. I could tell you all kinds of examples. I'm a big sports guy. One of my favorite, I love to watch football in the fall. One of my favorites is the multi-million-dollar receivers. The quarterback's going to throw the ball to the receiver. It's a perfect throw. And then the guy looks to see who's around him, who's going to hit him. And then the ball hits him in chest and falls to the ground because he didn't watch the ball.
Mm-hmm.
So you're paying somebody millions of dollars a year to catch a ball, and they can't even do that because of the ego. The ego makes them scared. They look to see who's around, and of course you can't catch the ball if you're not looking at it.
Yeah, one thing I want to bring this out before we move into this formula because I loved it. It said one of the things I learned early in my life, which my ego hated, has always hated, is that you learn the most in the shortest amount of time if you put yourself in high risk situations.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah. Well, let me finish. I thank you for reminding me. I get off on tangents easily here, but the formula, let me get that done, and then we can come back to it. So the I stands for innocence. P is present moment. I stands for be in a state of innocence, because that's totally counter to the way the ego operates. The ego is trying to figure everything out in your favor, based on the information it's got. Where, in fact, I was watching reruns of Army Wives one night and doing some computer work. And they have a lot of eulogies on there. A lot of people die, the soldiers die in that show. And one of the chaplains was saying, and of course, you can't get into the kingdom of God without the innocence of a child. And I went, oh, of course, that's another key piece. Maintaining that innocence shuts down the ego, which sounds a little risky to some folks. I have people say, said, this all sounds great, but I live in the real world, Well, there's another world going on there that those folks are not aware of typically, which is way more powerful. But so stay in the present moment, state of innocence, meaning you're just kind of allowing things to happen. Some people might call it being in the flow. And then the third thing is don't allow negative thoughts and feelings. That's the N, no negativity. And that's the biggest one, because if you shut down your negative thoughts and feelings, which is another key piece, because a lot of people don't realize we have total control over what we think and feel. Mm-hmm. We can think anything we want. Obviously, some things are harder, like, grief, maybe you break up with somebody or someone dies. I mean, that takes time to get over that sort of intensity. But for the most part, when you're in business, most everything else, you can change how you think or feel about anything fairly quickly. So that's a key piece when you realize you have that kind of control. So when you're getting ready to get on the phone, for example, I teach people get in the present moment, because if you're having any negative thoughts, you're not there. I've made thousands of cold calls. I've got like 15,000 people. My LinkedIn, and so and I'll call those people and they say, hi, this is what do I say? Hi, this is Sid Walker. Then I just say, how are you? Which you're not supposed to do. And then, of course, what happens is I can pretty much tell you how the call is going to go based on how the person responds. Because if they say, how'd you get my number? What are you selling? I just get off the phone with those folks. The people that I stay on the phone with go, great, Sid, how are you?
Yeah.
There's someone on the other end of the phone, and they're going, and they probably start out going, gee, do I know this guy? And then I come back and say, I'll just keep you a second. You and I are actually connected on LinkedIn. And I was just calling to see how you're doing and see if I could be of help.
So would that be kind of this PIN that we talked about? Is this what we do before or the whole time we're on the call? So what does the N stand for too? We don't have that yet either.
No negativity.
No negativity. Yeah.
No negativity. Okay.
No negative thoughts, no negative feelings.
Okay. And is this all pre the call or during or both? Or
I would say you're pretty much doing that as much of the time as possible. Like, how about all day long?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I'm actually teaching people, rather than to have an experience of being in the zone. A lot of people have had, like in sports or performing or something that's lots of different area, cooking. There's all kinds of different things. But rather than just have that experience once in a while, you can literally, in fact, the head woman at the monastery used to say, you can hold your high as long as you want. And what she meant was you can stay in the zone as long as you want. You just have to keep re-choosing it.
So this is totally reminding me, Linda, we do a lot of scripts and role plays and stuff. And it's taken me a while, honestly, Sid, to get to where I can do those, because I've never been great at memorizing scripts, because I much rather would just get on the phone and have a conversation with somebody.
Yeah.
So when it comes to actually having to memorize certain scripts, not that I can't memorize them, but it just hasn't felt as natural to me. And I love your process of present moment, innocence, no negativity. And really, one of the things I read about you was the client controller versus the relationship builder. And I think that when you're building the relationships, you have to be super present in the moment. And I used to feel like when I got into really heavy scripts, I don't know, Linda, I'd be interested to see if you felt like this too, but when I got into really heavy scripts, I got out of the being present with that person because I was so worried about trying to remember the script instead of being present in the moment and learning about the person.
Yeah. I always call that, we're so busy thinking about what we're going to say next, we don't bother to listen.
Totally.
We can't listen because we're just focused on what we're going to say rather than let's have a conversation and see where we can take it.
Yep.
There was a saying at the monastery that it took me a while to understand. I really get it now, but it was in the zone, you will be given everything as you need it. Period.
Wow. That's pretty powerful. If you figure out how to get in the zone, man, that's powerful.
And that's a different reality. It's a different world.
It is. I'm like, I feel glimpses of that, but I'd have to do a lot more work to get there.
Well, that's another interesting part too. The it's kind of like enlightenment, basically. Like the more you study this kind of thing, the more you realize that it's the biggest thing in the way is the ego's negativity. Because once you start to ignore your ego's negativity, you are at your best. The other way to say it, which to me is really, really kind of amazing, is in the zone. Again, if there's in the original reality we were given, which had no negativity, two things are true. One is you're perfect the way you are. That's amazing right there.
Yeah.
There's nothing to change. There's nothing to fix. And then the second thing is you can't fail at whatever you do. Doesn't mean everybody's going to buy, but doesn't that sound like more fun? You're perfect the way you are and you can't fail.
Way more fun.
Way more fun.
Yeah.
And I think about all the risk I would take, back to your statement about the ego didn't like it, but you learn the most by taking the most risk. And so if I really believe that to the highest level, I'll go take bigger risk, which comes back to Dana, what I've explained on the podcast before, the 4 C's. I'd make bigger commitments that scare the crap out of me.
Yeah.
It's from making those bigger commitments that our lives get bigger, because it takes courage.
Yeah.
And we got to go get the credentials and do all that. So I love this, because we would take bigger risk, and then our lives would invariably just be bigger and richer, because we'd help more people and all the things that really make us passionate about what we do.
Yeah.
The other way to look at it is, for years I thought my analytical mind was the problem, because they would kind of somehow give me reasons not to do things. And it's the same with the comfort zone. The reason the comfort zone is so powerful is because the ego is behind it. The ego, basically, it's a life or death matter for you not to take any risk. So we're up against a much bigger force than we realize. And that's kind of the other thing that becomes interesting about intuition is your intuition is operating from a massive database, thousands of times bigger than your intellect combined with your ego. So your intuition has a massive database. But your conscious mind only can hold a certain amount of information.
That's fascinating to me.
So what tends to happen is you can't consciously remember all the things you know. But if you ask yourself a question, you'll get an answer. It may not come right away, but it'll happen. I mean, sometimes for me, I'll be driving down the road thinking about something totally unrelated, or cleaning up after making dinner or something, and boom, there's an answer to a question I asked 2 days ago.
Love it.
That's how your intuition tends to work. So the comfort zone thing is way, in other words, you almost have to become an ego fighter to really be who you really are. Because that ego is pretty much trying to keep us all the way where one of my favorite sayings is, I've never heard anybody else say this: if there were no ego, there'd be no normal. The ego wants everything to be normal and everything to be a certain way, because it doesn't want there to be any risk, because it's obsessed with survival. Whereas the more you shift to being what I call an intuitive spirit, that's really where happiness, joy, fulfillment comes from, is following that part of yourself, not the ego's information that it's where it's figured everything out in order to survive. That's okay, but it's kind of boring.
Some people have bigger egos than others. Because I always say when I speak to a group, I always say, look, don't compare your insides to anyone else's outside. And what I mean by that is all those limiting beliefs and those thoughts that, well, I can't do it where I'm at, or I'm not smart enough, or I'm not this enough, or whatever. Do some people have that worse than others, do you think? Well, I think some people for sure let it hold them back. Mm-hmm. Like you can see it, if I'm watching someone or coaching someone, you can see that they refuse to get past those. So therefore they don't get very far with what they're trying to accomplish. Is there some people, do you think, that have it worse than others?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I would say,
what is it?
In my coaching work, I've been able to have amazing success with pretty much everybody but one kind of person. And those are the people, and it's not because they don't want to do it, but the people that are very controlling and have made a lot of money have the toughest time giving up the control and just letting things happen. Which is what we're talking about. And when you block the ego out and trust your instincts as an approach to life instead of figuring everything out.
So are those the people that are trying to protect what they have and they're afraid of losing it? Or
yeah, it's like they can't let go because they've made money being kind of a control freak and a giant ego.
So they're afraid if they let that go, then that will be their secret sauce that they actually let go.
Yeah. So I would say that some of the richest people I know have 8th grade educations and are obsessed with are totally afraid of being poor.
Wow. I guess, yeah. Oh, interesting. That's interesting.
Would you say though, Sid, that, because I feel like sometimes we'll have conversations of, I feel like I have a good intuition, but someone else may feel like they don't have a good intuition. What do you think is the difference between that?
Well, that's true, because it's especially, just men to women. I have a lot of intuitive men as clients, or I've helped a lot of analytical guys become pretty intuitive, which has been fascinating. So anybody can learn, because we're all intuitive as kids, and then we get talked out of it. So I think the women tend to maintain their intuition more, or as I like to say, the guys are simpler. They only have one chromosome. The women have two. So it's more the women tend to keep track of the. My women clients, typically, one of the first things I'll say to them is, forget all the stuff the guys told you and just go be your loving, nurturing self.
I guess that's true, though. You do kind of hear women talk about intuition more than men.
Yeah. Well, and I'm wondering if that has to do with being a mother or something too. Maybe, I don't know. My question to you is on intuition. The way I understand it, what I hear, and I want you to tell me if this is not correct or not what you're meaning. But let's say I'm on the phone with someone and I say, where would you like to be in 3 years? Blah, blah, whatever I say, or based on everything got going on, what's the single most important thing you and I should talk about? And in that, I'm in the present moment. I'm into curiosity. My intuition will lead me where that needs to go. Is that what you mean by intuition? Because I can't put my arms around it, how it applies to when you're trying to make calls and call reluctance and all that.
Good question.
So this is another one of my biggest breakthroughs, again, in 35 plus years of coaching. And again, it's a one-liner. What feels intuitively right is God's plan. Most people aren't doing that. Most people are doing the ego's plan. They're trying to figure everything out.
Oh, gotcha. So intuitively, I feel like God's put me here. Honestly, I feel like he's put me here to help successful but overworked real estate entrepreneurs.
Okay.
Understand power of leverage and passive income so that we can get them to have freedoms so they can have the lives that they want. I when I'm doing that, I'm in the zone. I could do it all day long, every day. However, ego gets in my way and I don't make the calls to the people that might be the people that God has planned for me to help change their life.
And so can you feel that?
Very well.
Is this what you're supposed to be doing?
Absolutely, without a doubt.
Okay. So to me, intuition by definition is an internal promptings barely caught in the web of human consciousness.
Wait, okay. Say that again.
Internal promptings barely caught in the web of human consciousness. It's really subtle. Whereas your ego is loud. Now, your intuition can get loud if you're in danger, but for the most time, it's very quiet.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're talking about how you feel about the work that you're doing or your mission here, you know, that's a more kind of quiet, gentle feeling. And so what I like to say to people is move toward what feels right and move away from what doesn't feel right.
I love it. That's amazing.
It's much easier and quicker. Because
Yeah.
your ego is going to want to figure everything out. Your ego is going to want to, look at every angle. Whereas, like to me, for example, if I'm working with an analytical real estate guy right now, but he's pretty intuitive, and I'll just say, which part of your brain are you using? He's trying to figure out why the person didn't just buy, and I just go, who cares?
Oh, good point. Good point.
It wasn't supposed to be. Go find someone. Go find a new person.
Wow.
The ego wants to dig in and figure everything out, whereas your spirit goes, whatever.
Yeah. Love it.
And that's so true.
Oh, so true. Love that.
I have one quick question.
Sure.
So I was reading, just when I was doing some research on your website, if I was reading, you talked about the 3 things, like 1 was how to get appointments with the right people, 2 was how to establish trust, and then 3 was how to eliminate all barriers to peak performance. But my question was, what advice would you give somebody on how to establish better trust with people?
Well, we've been kind of talking about it. I mean, the more you trust. My first book I wrote was called Trusting Yourself, and then I changed it years later to Trust Your Gut. But I would have people ask me a lot of times, how do you get people to trust you? And which I'm an expert on. And of course, my first response is, well, the quickest way is not what you think. The quickest way to get people to trust you is to trust yourself in the moment with whatever it feels like there is to do. Now, that's too easy. We already know how to do that. It's like, can that really be a sales technique, so to speak, that would lead you to, I train people that make millions of dollars a year to be better interviewers by simply being more in the present moment and stop thinking so much. And just listen to what's next. What's the elephant in the room, so to speak.
Yes.
Now that's
what's the conversation that needs to be had.
Yeah. Or just ask more questions.
Mm-hmm.
How can I help? Because to me, I guess I'm very permission based in my approach to things. I'm always asking people, well, so do you want this? I'll make a little bit of an offer, and then I'll say, well, is that something you'd like to know more about, or is that something you'd like to work on? Sure. One of my favorite questions is, in order for you and I to get more out of our meeting, or as much as we can out of our meeting today, would it be okay if I ask you a few questions? Sure. Well, guess what? You can ask any question you want now.
That just sounds so much better. Permission-based just sounds so much better.
Yeah. Well, it's totally, again, that's relationship building.
Yeah. Yeah, it just feels better too.
Yeah, because to me, that's been my whole thing for decades now, is my main focus is on treating people with honor and respect. In fact, my opening language for most of my financial advisors, and you'd have to modify a little bit for real estate, but it's my main job is to help you. Let me back up. I usually say I'm bringing different values to the table. My main job is to help you make educated decisions that feel right to you, which actually includes doing nothing. And this is not about me trying to sell you something so you can relax. I mean, people physically relax when you say that. And then the second part I always like to throw in is, and I'll make you one more promise, is that if anything doesn't feel right to you, we're not doing it, period.
Love that.
I love that too.
So that's what people really want, but they don't know how to ask for it.
And you change the whole energy of everything. It's not them over there and you over here. Now we're on the same side. And by the way, if we decide that it's better for you to do something completely different or not with me at all, that's totally okay. People get so relieved when they know that is the stance that you take.
Yeah. And it's, it's very low key, because that's what I like to call it, the low key approach. It's the relationship builder, but also it's the low key kind of thing where It's another one of the things that I ran into years ago, which really astounded me. But it's like the more room you give people not to do anything, they start looking for stuff to buy.
So true. So true.
It's just, if people go, that can't be true. That's, that whole client controller mentality is like, people are too dumb to make a buying decision. You've got to lead them into a corner,
And to be honest with you, I feel my own body language when someone takes that stance with me, it tenses up and I become just flipping adamant that I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even if I thought I was going to be interested in whatever it is, that to me, that stance of, well, when can we expect that contract back from you? Can I get that today? I mean, something where we're not even at that point yet. It'd be different if we had agreed to do the contract and you want to know if you're going to get back today. But when they take that hard stance, it's something in me and I'm a buyer. I always say, let me just tell you, I will buy more than anybody else
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You do not have to sell me.
Yeah.
But the way to sell me is to not sell me.
Yeah.
And especially if I automatically think you're just selling and you're not. I went through this experience earlier this year with a personal salesperson at Neiman Marcus. And I finally just said, look, here's the deal. I'm the best buyer in the world. Don't sell me. I have to feel like when you say to me, yes, this is good for you, it is good for me, not just everything is good for me. Now I'm not going to believe you. You know what I mean? And so I think all of us have to think about our own selves in those situations. That doesn't help me. I don't feel like that person is got my best interest at heart.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's my close. When I'm talking to people about coaching, typically my close is always if this feels right to you, jump in and do it. It'll work.
Yeah.
If it doesn't feel right, don't do it.
I love that.
Yeah.
Perfect. I love it. Yes. So good. Okay. So real quick, we're just about to run out of time. There was a real quick piece, and I don't know if you can explain this quickly, but you had a formula called VAA. Can you touch on that quick?
Sure. Yeah, I learned that from a guy years ago. I used to travel with him. He had Fortune 100 clients. That was really fun because I did some coaching sessions with Fortune 100 presidents in their private dining rooms, just kind of, I could talk about that for 15 minutes. That was kind of amazing. But at the same time, I learned this formula from the guy, Kurt Wright was his name. I modified it a little bit, but basically what I realized was everything kind of in this self-help movement comes under those three headings of vision, action, attitude. In other words, so those are the three keys to creating anything. And of course, as Kurt used to say, if you've got a vision of what you're trying to accomplish, you take action, and particularly trust your intuitive instincts as you take action, and then maintain the proper attitude no matter what happens, which basically means you're finding the positive out of whatever's happening. That if you're doing those if you're doing those three things, that only one of two things is going to happen. Either you're going to get the result that you're after, or you're going to get a lesson required to get the result. Therefore, you can't lose.
Love it.
Yeah. So I put that in all my books in one form or another, but that just was a very powerful, to have a vision, then take action, and then maintain your attitude. I mean, it really is that simple most of the time. But
yeah, it's one of those things we say simple, but not necessarily easy, right? Because the egos jump in there along the way and try to keep you from doing all of that.
If you let your ego stick its nose in the tent, so to speak, you're going to have instant reasons not to. I mean, that's probably been one of my biggest challenges in life is my own doubt.
Okay,
Yes.
that was going to be my next question, Sid. I was going to say, I can't be the only person that's listening to you and wondering, how do you know if your instinct is right or not?
Well, yeah, that's practice for sure. One of the things too is you can always try it out. Well, actually, one of the things that I've gotten people to do, and I've been doing this for years, decades actually, is I keep a log of every time I trust my intuitive instincts, and then what happened.
That's good.
Right.
Because the problem is because your ego hates the unknown, your ego hates intuition, and so because it wants to be the source of all the information, and the ego is an unknown source, drives the ego nuts. So the ego basically, anytime you do something intuitive and it works, your ego tries to erase that from your conscious mind as quickly as possible.
Wow. That's why we remember the negative more than the positive parts, but what the calls got us.
Whereas if I sit down and read 20 years of the experiences I've had where I've trusted my intuition and it's worked in ways I never would have imagined, I'm a different person.
We may need to have you back on to read some of those out loud.
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, we've all got them. You know, they're all in there.
Too.
Yeah. Because that's part of my database discussion is your intuition actually has total recall. Whereas your conscious mind, you know, forgets more than it remembers.
Wow. I love this. I love it.
Dude, this stuff's so fascinating to me. I love it.
Yeah, you could go on and on forever. So Sid, I'd love for you to kind of explain to the audience, how do they find you? I know you do one-on-one coaching. We talked a little bit about a group coaching opportunity, either through Zoom or if we ever get back in person again. Why don't you talk to the audience a little bit on if people are saying, gosh, I need Sid in my life. I need help in this area. How do they reach you? How do they find you? We're going to put links to your books that Dana and I have read.
So the main book, if it's, you know, it's a call reluctance issue, that, you know, the title of my book is kind of long, but it's how I conquered call reluctance, fear of self-promotion, and increased my prospecting. So basically on Amazon, if you type in Sid Walker and call reluctance, that book will come up, you know, because it's the #1 book in that category.
Yeah. And I read that one. It's fabulous. And I'm about finished with your other one. So
that's, I would start there. I'd start with the book. It's also on audio. I probably sell 8 times more audio than books.
Wow.
Yeah, which, you know, a lot of salespeople want to listen to stuff. So, and then the other, of course, I talk to people, happy to talk for a half hour just to get to know people. Call me, email me. My email is Sid, S-I-D, at sidwalker.com. And if you go, I've got a bunch of websites, but I've got 2 for coaching. One is sidwalker.com, and the other one is coachsidwalker.com.
Awesome.
That's more my executive coaching, and the sidwalker.com is more the sales.
So the sidwalker.com would be more like what you've done with financial planners, real estate agents, and people like that.
Yeah, that's an older website. I just did the executive one recently, like last the holidays this year. So that's all kind of, but that's more of an executive.
So tell me, who's your favorite to coach? Executives or entrepreneurial people, more like financial planners and realtors and things like that?
Oh, I definitely like sales. I like intangible sales more than anything else. And I think it's because of the communication. I guess I've always liked to do something somewhat unique. Your average corporation, to a great degree, is a giant ego.
Good way to put it.
You know, so it's a whole lot more fun to work with people that have more control over their lives. So financial planners, real estate people, I mean, it's way more fun to work with people that can kind of go do anything they want. If you're making money, no one cares.
Yeah, for sure. I love it. Well, Sid, this has been fabulous. Really appreciate your time today. Dana, any final thought or thing you'd want to add as we wrap up?
No, I took 5 pages of notes though, so I'm sure I'll think of something later.
All right. Well, you're fun to talk to because you really get everything I'm talking about, and it's, I guess, as I mentioned before, it's kind of humbling to realize there isn't anything we haven't talked about that isn't thousands of years old. But what's amazing is how much people have forgotten.
Yeah.
The ego's just made us all kind of dumb and numb.
I love it. And, you know, to me, there's comfort in knowing that there's nothing new, that it's all old. You know, to me, that's comforting. I don't know why, but it just is, because that means it's tried and true. You know, there's not, you know, because I think we all at some time when somebody comes out and you think, well, maybe the world's changed and someone forgot to tell me. But the truths, the real truths in life, I don't think will ever change. It's that we move away from them, or we think there's, you know, new truths and we doubt them.
Yeah. Well, and I can tell you, for me personally, I can tell when I get really, really, really busy, like overwhelmingly busy with work and life, I don't hear kind of that inner spirit or trust my intuition as much as when I'm like at a little bit of a calmer, more relaxed space.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So true. So true. Love it.
that's actually, and that's a good way to end, just to realize that the quieter you are, the easier it is to hear your own truth.
Yeah.
That's great.
I can always tell when I need to reel myself back in and kind of slow down.
Yeah. That's great. Listen, if you have a question or a challenge, or you'd like to submit your name to be on our podcast for Dana and I to help you with anything you have going on in your business world, just reach out to us at info@everythinglifeandrealestate. And remember, the number one way you can, number one thing you can do for Dana and I is leave us a review. We'd love to hear your review. And also, we would love for you to pass it on to anyone that you feel like would benefit from these conversations. So, if you have a comment, question, or thought, be sure to email us or reach out to us on our Instagram page at info@everythinglifeandrealestate. So, Dana, I will talk to you next week.
Talk to you then. Thanks, Sid.
Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
Be sure to subscribe for more business strategies and tactics to inspire you to live an abundant real estate life. Don't forget to rate and review so we can bring you the best content. Find this and other valuable information at everythinglifeandrealestate.com.